have to say that when Emily invited me and the title of the talk was pronounced Out There, I thought, what better title could there possibly be than Out There? Because in one two-word sentence, if you say it like a question, you really do kind of almost summarize one of the largest questions in what we do, which is a form of spatial abstraction. Where now is out there? Is out there a space, or is it a hypothesis? You know, where is out there with technology coming into play and the new kinds of spaces that opens up?
Even behavior.
Even behavior.
Yeah. And your frame of mind.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I was wondering, how did you come up with that title, and how did you feel like it related, at least in some overarching way, to your work?
You know, it just came to my mind, like a lot of images that kind of gel with me. You know, I could be surfing the internet and somebody will go bang. I'll say, okay, that's it. I have no idea. Every year that I live, I'm beginning to think that I am more of a medium than an ordinary human being. And so when actually, I think Vivian and Christy said, what's the title of your show? Or what's the title of your talk? And I was like, Out There. Because I just said it. Somebody might have said it through my mouth. I'm not sure. But yeah. And I also think because I am painting spaces that are, you know, very deep sometimes, juxtaposed with painting spaces that are really in front of you. So, so the whole thing is that when you know, I studied at the studio school and I painted in a very modernist way. I was trained as a modernist, right? And so, in modernist space, it's like flipping the table up. And if you think of Picasso's collages or, you know, his paintings, everything is kind of in a kind of pictorial space. Mm-hmm. And I don't actually work that way. So in a way, I'm breaking the rule of modernism, but I'm also very conscious that I want to engage with the, you know, the sort of push and pull of the surface in that way, so that the space can go really in and then it can come back out. Yeah.
And yet what you're saying about your modernist-based training is still the fingerprints are all over your paintings, because it is a diagrammatic space, but in part. You know, it has this sort of like propositional space quality. It's proposing something, but it's embodying it too.
Right. Yeah, you know, I spent 2 years in studio school painting still lifes. And, you know, I was a firm believer that, you know, when Kuni said you can do everything, you can say everything through a still life, I was like, yes, you can. You know? And yet, I don't do that at all in my, you know, I've really gone away from it, and I've gone from the depicted space of life into a mental space of, I think that I went through a period of it being a collage space. And then it went into a more unified collage space. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, it's been said, and I don't remember by who, that the two great 20th century innovations was psychology and collage. You know, like the collage aesthetic of being able to kind of combine and recombine things, but also the opening up of this vast interior space of the personal psyche. Psyche, my way of psychology.
Yes, so true. And when I first started teaching a long time ago, I remember talking about the collage space that MTV was one of the first, I guess you would say, popular media manufacturer that took the collage space and ran with it.
Yeah.
And we didn't really know what was going on. It was just like images in front of us moving very quickly.
Faster than anything before, the way things were cut.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But now, you know, it's interesting because when I look at a painting that's very collage constructed, I have a little itch, and the itch is telling me that I would like to see it as a unified image.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that unity has become a really important element to the work, because I do use all these disparate images so that nothing, you can take from column A, column B, you can just like take 20 different images and throw them on canvas, but they're not meaningful until you synthesize it, right? So then, so what do you do with that collage feeling? You have to synthesize it and cook it in a way, right? Until it has, until it makes sense, until it has a hierarchy.
Which is what your process as a person would be as you're painting it, because your own filters that you've built up over time is what you're pressing all those disparate elements through.
Right.
But it's the time in the studio through the painting process that's the ultimate synthesizer.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, wow. Can you feel that vibration? That's amazing. Okay, so
what is your process like then in the studio? How long does it take? Are there points where you have to put them away for a while? Like, how do these things actually evolve?
You know, I always think it's self-evident, but it's not evident at all, because that's one of the questions that everybody asks me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I've become really interested in petroglyphs recently,
Mm-hmm.
because petroglyphs are the first drawings that people got interested in expressing. And so why are these petroglyphs in the South Seas, or the New Guinea Islands, or Africa, America, Wales? Why do they have similar images? If that is, so you could say that they have a kind of a DNA that wants to express certain things, but I think it's bigger than that. And I think that there have been theories about the sky looking very different millions of years ago. Well, I should say thousands of years ago. And that people were really expressing based on the sky.
Right.
So I was looking through these petroglyphs. Anyway, I saw something that just struck me, like I was saying before. It was an image of a person, but it had kind of a double halo over the head. And there was just something that rang extremely true about it. And I don't know exactly why, and I may find out later this year or next year or 5 years from now, but or after I paint it. But so I start with a drawing, and then I kind of feel it get into it through color, through light. What kind of light do I want in this painting? Because the drawings are black and white ink.
Mm-hmm.
And then gradually the painting comes up, but sometimes there's surprises. Like I'll say, well, I think I'll do this. And then halfway down that road, I see that I'm actually doing that, and it's more interesting. So eventually I hit a wall. I don't know what to do. Before I start the painting, it's torture. Like that is really one of the most, is it
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You don't know what you do. You don't know what you're doing. You think like, oh, this is the last painting I did was the last good painting I'll ever do. And then, it's just like, I can hear the laughter in the room, meaning like, okay, other people relate to this. And then you start a new painting, and then it's like, oh, okay, I think I can manage to get through this. So when I hit a wall, I have to turn away. And usually I stretch the painting up.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm working on the wall because I like to do a lot of fine lines and sometimes I use a maul stick, and then you press the maul stick into the canvas, something's right, but it just doesn't click, then I have to think of, well, what would make it click? How could I go back and bring it further? And then I start another painting, and then at some point, while I'm walking through my studio, it comes to me. I'm very grateful, and I don't doubt it. I just go bang, you know, and then, but you know, like those little steps behind you, they, all I knew was that I wanted to get this, I tend to put the earth below, and then the sky or the universe above. So what that means is that that we are somewhere in space looking down on the earth, and we're also looking into the universe. So it's a very odd place. Most people don't always go there. And when I did this painting, I liked that this was floating, but I also wanted a connection to the ground and to a kind of, I wanted to suggest a narrative that might say, oh, well, you know, some people go this way and some people go that way, and maybe we all end up in the same similar place, but, you know, these are the options that we all travel through in our life. And that's why I put stairs there. But it took me a long time to come up with the stairs.
And yet these paintings aren't strictly narrative, even though it's so intriguing. You have little narrative areas. But then there's this kind of current moment timelessness that's in all of them too, where you're just in the current moment and there's no past and no future, even though it's clear there's a time-based process involved in how they're made, but it's something very stately and really serene. And I think in each and every painting, they manage to occupy that space. And I'm wondering, do you sense that? Is it endpoint, or do you nurture that, or is that simply how these paintings evolve?
Yeah, time is so elusive to me. I know, you know, I'm trying to understand the concept of parallel time, parallel worlds. It's particularly difficult, and I think it's difficult for all of us because we are so brought up to have sequential time. So that is, but I think that I'm interested in something that's kind of iconic.
Yeah.
Because I like the idea that something iconic can be present in your mind in a very abstract way, and but it can change over time. It can, you know, chairness can change. When you're a baby, chairness might be the high chair, and when you're an old person, chairness might be a wheelchair. But I think that it's always nice to offer an alternative, you know, that says, you know, we can expand the way we see something by the icon, but it's ambiguous enough that it offers a narrative, but then it's also ambiguous.
Well, I'd like to stick with that for a moment, because I think that that's such a crucial point in why your painting and what I do in painting and abstract painting can be so important right now, because we have Eastern and Western versions of icons, but they're fairly fixed. You know, they rely on being able to be made again and again by hands over hundreds of years with very similar symbols, and with not being tagged to an individual artist necessarily, whereas we have this great benefit of being able to construct new icons. And in your case, because you're kind of building up these multivalent images, they're not just crystals and iconic shapes within spaces and the iconic placement within the picture plane that are floating. in a kind of vast hypothetical space, but there's also little architectures. It's very different in some notable respects, and maybe far more speaking to a time where, like, more of a multiverse needs. I was wondering what you thought about that.
Well, there's a couple questions you just asked.
Well, these are contemporary icons. Only like we can do that now. If we were painting 100 years, 300 years ago, that wouldn't have been available to us.
Right.
But why now? And why these? Is this, are we evolving to be able to make a kind of iconic image that's important for some reason for culture? Can we even know what that is?
Just like the internet opens up information to everybody. You can, if you research deeply enough, you can go anywhere, right? But you have to know how to research, and you have to know how to not get caught in traps.
Practice
right?
discernment.
Right. So just like information is available to us, images are available to us, and I think the language of painting is about putting together the image in a way that can still speak to us, because it has, it's in a language of painting, but it also can expand. I mean, I say expand because people like to say, oh, it's just painting, or we only do installation art here. So I get very defensive about that, because I think that painting, the attributes of a painting is that it stands still. You can put it anywhere, and when you visit it over the course of 20 years, it will look different to you.
Yeah, your mind moves in relation to the painting.
Right.
So you can see your mind moving over time.
Right, and you can't do that with movies. As soon as you finish the movie, you can't even construct the plot. It's so complicated. And so you have no subtle relationship to it. That is the key, is the subtlety, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with the painting, you can get into the nuances of the painting. And Eric is sitting in the first row, and I'm just thinking, even a color relationship of one of Eric's paintings can kick off something, and can make you, can open up a sort of perceptive state, which opens you to many other things. But I wanted to say something about the icon, because both you and I share interest in faces, right? So a face can be a mask, and I'm always thinking about faces, because while the viewer is looking at the painting can turn around and look at the viewer, right? And there's an engagement. Since you're a baby, bang, bang, and then the baby goes, yeah, okay, So that is, to me, that's an endlessly compelling phenomenon, right? And so, just like you might be walking down the street, all of a sudden you feel like somebody might be watching you, and you look up into a window and there's somebody looking down on you, So we are, and then surveillance, right? So we are kind of being watched, and that is something that's maybe unique in our time.
And we're also being kind of surveilled by our own, let's say, higher consciousness, or more diffuse sense of our, subconscious. So there's that element too. And then, as you're saying, reflecting on the face that we see as a young child, the mirror stage is so important. This sort of pre-verbal stage where you're getting mirrored by your parent and understanding something about your own humanity on a very nonverbal level. I think something like that also can happen in painting, and I see it happening in yours, because there's entities in there, but who's to say that's not a mirror to our own potential?
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that I've been thinking a lot about, and I know you probably have too, is that we're living in a really difficult time, and the world that we brought up our children is not the world that is going on right now. And I don't, part of me looks at the world and it says, all of my complaints have always been present. It's just that they're becoming more transparent to you. But then I also realized that no, there's something wrong. So the question is, how do you address that as a painter? Because I'm very opposed to making kind of politicized art that will preach to the converted. Mm-hmm. Every single person that goes to a museum or a gallery knows what's going on in the world, and they know that the wars are going on. They know, they're very educated. So they're very what do we have to contribute?
Yeah.
You must think about that.
Oh, I totally think about that.
Yeah. So
especially because I think when you do abstract painting, it can seem to be very beside the point, and like it doesn't have any kind of purpose whatsoever these days. Abstraction itself is seen as perhaps something with such fuzzy edges that really, what is it anymore?
Yeah, and I think that I'm sure that you're an artist that after 9/11, I know that every artist I talked to after 9/11, it was like, okay, so what do we do now? And everybody was in their studio scratching their heads, and everybody came up with different responses. And my response was, because I was painting flowers, my response was to make a painting that had black flowers in a yellow ground, and then there were tiny little colored flowers that were kind of peeping out behind the black flowers, and the black flowers were, from different sort of needlepoint tapestries, but different cultures that had evolved the flower out of a naturalistic flower. But then I think COVID was, and the pandemic kind of brought us to this place where our world got shifted around, and then we had to start sort of kind of mitigate that with how we are looking at our world and our paintings. And not to say that my paintings really changed. I don't think anybody could tell which paintings were before COVID and which paintings were after. But I sort of felt like whatever reason I'm an artist, whatever reason there is that I make art became stronger because I realized that the impetus to make it was that much more important.
Yeah. Well, something about these works that I wanted to bring up kind of hinges on that, is that they seem like machines for perception. And
I love that. That's great. How do you steal it?
What I mean by that, and then I want you to tell me what you think, is that maybe that's one role that abstraction really nails on the head, is that we can construct not just hypotheses, but actual perceptual machines that can fine-tune and offer new possibilities for how people can perceive their world. Like right now, unless folks can metabolize all these different discourses and levels of information in realms of space and find kind of like with your paintings a synthesized living composite of it with some discernment, unless they can do that, it's people get really lost in the infoscape.
Well, I think that looking at painting, infoscape is the other side of that coin, right?
Yeah.
So we live in a world of perpetual 24, I don't know what your dreams are like, but at least the waking hours of infoscape, right? And what does that consist of? That consists of kind of nonstop processing of something that you're being fed, right? You're constantly being fed. You're having to digest things that that maybe you didn't want to digest.
It's really, there's a lot of complexity there that
Right.
people are confronted with.
But they can't approach the individual subject or the individual person or even the individual food with a lot of texture or attention because they are multitasking on many levels. And people don't see, like you can send an email, nobody sees it. So that means that the email has to go out 100 times, And then you see that these companies that are sending me emails like 2 times a day. I'm thinking, why? And but I have to delete it, I have to process it. So painting is so great because I think it's great for the viewer, and I think it's great for me as an activity of just like saying, okay, well, I'm just going to get this really simple. And I'm going to mix some dirt and paint and color, and then I'm going to make it have a white to it, and then you have to feel your way through it. I mean, when was the last time you had a delicious food that you masticated? And you just said like, I'm just going to sit and just taste it and think about it. None of us ever do that, and yet, so our life is going by really quickly, faster and faster, and we're just kind of skimming the surface of everything. And I think that that's what I want my paintings to do, and that's why I think I'm so interested in the icon that's looking back at you saying, excuse me, maybe you've overlooked something, or how about visiting this again,
Well, that brings up one of the difficult things about being a painter is that you're saying, how do we digest something in a space? Like we can either be in the gallery or the museum, or it comes home with us. But otherwise, we see it as this little bitty icon on the phone.
Yeah. Instagram.
Yeah, and the hell of it is, your works look phenomenal.
Really?
In this little format.
Really?
But of course, they are totally different
In real life.
person.
Because most people who come to the studio say, oh, your work is so different, than on your website.
But thank God, right?
Yeah. But I remember the old saying used to be like, oh, these Australian painters, they were, they're looking at the, they're looking at art form, and they're getting all these, they're looking at, from Australia, they're looking at New York painters, and then they can make work in Australia that's kind of a knockoff or whatever, but then they have to make it look good for art form. And now we don't need to do that anymore. We can just make work that's good for Instagram.
People do that, I think. Some people do.
And that's why I like to include a lot of details.
Yeah.
But I'm really mortified how Instagram conscious I've been during this time. Because I realize that that is how the world works, and there's no use retooling the world, right? So, yeah. Anyway, we don't need to go down there.
Well, back to the idea of like building a durable filter so that people can see more interestingly through their own eyes. I think it was Carl Jung that said, observation is creation. So, like as a painter, do you feel like the more one gets into your kind of your world, all these realms that come together allows them to be able to have like a broader experience of non-material spaces, not just one non-material space, but multiple intersecting non-material spaces.
Yeah, and too. Yeah. I mean, I love it when people say, oh, this painting makes me feel this way, this painting makes me feel that way, and I'm like, oh, that's what I, intended. So that there is something that I'm doing, that I am communicating. I am completing the circuit of communication. Because I remember students used to say to me, I just want to paint. I just want to paint. And I'm perfectly happy doing what I want to do, and you don't have to tell me anything about my painting. I'm like, okay, but that doesn't engage with the circuit of communication. And that's really important to me, that there is clarity, that there is a kind of engagement with historical language, that there is this, that they're accessible, but not to the point where they're accessible to everybody.
Well, they're not pedantic. I mean, they don't
Right.
they don't have things that people are required to get that's super specific in order to be able to climb in and get quite a great deal out of these.
Yeah. So I like to think that my paintings are accessible to everybody. You just have to. They might not be accessible right away. You just have to spend a little time with it. Just like you would a novel. You don't get it right away. You don't get anything really good right away. And that's, I think, the thing that we're moving away from is that 5-second flash that, I get it. No, you don't need to get it in 5 seconds, and you shouldn't get it in 5 seconds.
I wonder, do you sense that people are maybe starting to crave spending longer with things like paintings or, certain experiences that instead of like that quick internet grab? I mean, because we've all been, subject to that fast news, quick cuts, all
So
that stuff.
it's all about awareness, right? Like, you can divide the population. Half the population knows that they're subjected to addiction of media, any kind of media. And half the population is just busy, like, eating it up. So I think that awareness is the first step, right? And then, so if you're aware, you can control. It's as easy as that, right? Yeah, I mean, the thing about, which reminds me that, the thing about the drips in my painting, because sometimes people say, oh, you're dripping in your painting. But the reason I do that and I don't wipe it away, sometimes I do, it's distracting, is that these paintings are still very much about a moment. And the moment of making the art. And I think what you were asking about whether people are tired of media and want to go to something that's more tactile, I think that the paint is magical because the hand is visible. Although there are paintings that are made by hand and you can't see where the tape was, you can't see where, you don't know how it was made. It was a complete mystery, like maybe bronze paintings, and they're just as interesting because you look at it and you're like, how the hell did you do that? So that and with a complete disregard of the hand. So I think that when I'm working with a lot of detail, it's like, okay, I've been a good girl for like 3 hours. I've been a good girl. Now I'm going to break it loose, and then I just want to like kick everything down and stand out of the room and shout.
Well, and there's so much like giant gesture in some of these, along with the tight details. So the kind of like the space between those kinds of movements, that's where the space is. Because those are different realms of activity, different speeds. So it's not like time and space in a terrestrial way. It's really setting up a whole different paradigm. But several ones at once, because they're also highly about, like, I don't know, I just keep thinking that they're consciousness accelerators.
Oh, there's another term. You gotta write these down. That is probably the ultimate highest goal I think that art can do. is to open a portal for your consciousness. And I think that that's what the, I don't know if you remember, but in the 90s, there were a lot of shows that addressed beauty.
Mm-hmm.
And then you would go to a show and it would be like, okay, well, that person thinks it's beautiful. It may not be my definition, so it becomes this really subjective thing. So there is that aspect of beauty that's very subjective. But then I think that beauty does exist as a concept and a word. And it doesn't mean garbage, and it doesn't mean cloud, it doesn't mean all these other things. So the thing about beauty that's so interesting is that it pulls you out of your own reality, and it allows your consciousness to shift a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in that, I like to see it as a practice, right? So you might think like, okay, you shift your consciousness for a millisecond. What good does that do? And that's a very valid question. But if you're shifting your consciousness over and over again, it sort of like opens the door, right? And it opens the door so that we can evolve as people. Because let's face it, we are in the forefront of culture. And if we can't evolve the culture, if we can't evolve the conversation, then we're just holding up mirrors to the society.
Mm-hmm.
And I have stopped being tolerant about art that's just holding up a mirror to society. I live at Astor Place. I don't need to see the mirror of society. I just walk out of my door and it's right there. I need to see something else.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just hope moving to the country won't make my work.
Astor Place.
Exactly. It's the scary part.
So I know that, and I know you personally, and we've shared our book lists with one another, and I know you read a lot, and that you feed your mind with all kinds of information. And reflect on that a bit in terms of how that threads through your creative process.
I will say that the two most inspiring books that I've ever read, and it made the penny drop of sort of my raison d'etre, were not books about art. And that is a really astounding thing to say. I'm very interested in, I kind of found that the most concrete way I can talk about it is that I became really interested in archeology. And archeology opens up a lot of questions that that scientists are still contesting the answer. But it brings up to the forefront all kinds of things from other civilizations, other times. We could be talking about 10,000 years ago, we could be talking about 20,000 years ago, we could be talking about a million years ago. With the new technology of LiDAR, more and more things are coming up. And at the same time, I'm also really interested in Taoism, which opened up the portal of quantum mechanics and particle physics, that they're spending $1 billion trying to find out what the Taoists said 2,000 years ago. We were quite certain that everything was connected. Mm-hmm. And now, through the work they're doing at CERN, we see that that is true. So what that tells me is that we are a culture that if we can't find proofs for things, if we can't touch it, and we can't see it, we don't acknowledge it. Right? And so I'm making paintings that you can see and you can touch, figuratively. But but your emotion and your response to it and what you're thinking is not, you cannot prove it. You cannot, how do you say it? You cannot verify, thank you.
But then again, that's why you're a visual artist instead of a scientist, because you don't want repeatable results. You are recreating or creating anew something different each time. And even though it's within a greater body of work that shares, it's all connected and it has commonalities, you are proposing something a little different each time, building that language, like creating that language for people to step into.
Right, and that's where I think that I lose a lot of audience, because when you make an object that looks like every other object that comes out of your studio, if you make 15 or 20 of the things that are just kind of variations on the same theme, I sort of call it like factories art, then your audience stays with you. It's really wonderful. You have this audience that stays with you, right?
And gallery that stays with you.
I don't do that. I really, and I used to think of it as a handicap. I have come to think that the life I live is one of true luxury. It's luxurious because I get to do what I want to do, and people, if they don't have the sophistication to follow me and my language, then it's their loss. But I can't do anything about it. I get really bored if I'm producing the same thing over and over again. I did do that once in my life. It was a fascinating experience. I did this one painting, and everybody was like, wow, that's a really cool painting. So, and they weren't people in the art world who said that. They were other people. So I did variations, 3 of them. A woman wanted one of them. She said, I'll write you a check next week. And then next week came, gone, no check. Anyway, she ended up stealing the painting from me. The only thing I can really say about it, and I feel really good about it, is that she stole one of the 3 paintings that I did. And so it was an experiment. She deserved to have a painting that was a repeat. But I get really bored doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Although I will say that I like to take the same subject matter and try it from different angles. Try it, if I can say it in this way, then it'll be interesting too. Or what about if I put that over here? There are infinite numbers of possibilities that come up, and they're all waiting to be experimented.
And yet all these paintings are totally different. I mean, even though they share certain elements and they have some palette commonalities, like the little structure down there is in no way like the little structures down here or over there, like all these little architectures that appear, sometimes they're more dimensional and other times more diagrammatic. They're all different.
Yeah,
and some things don't have them at all.
Yeah. and that's when I feel schizophrenic, and I have to say, no, I'm not schizophrenic. One of the reasons why I made that entryway of the space with all these little paintings is because I wanted people to come in and kind of get into the world of ideas, and then the big paintings, in many cases, flesh out a little bit more of what the little paintings hint at. Mm-hmm. So I think that there are themes. For 20 years, or almost 20 years, I painted drapery, and then the circle, and then it was the vertical column of the chakras, and now I feel like I'm exploring worlds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. In fact, that was going to be something I wanted to bring up next, is because this body of work, and actually your last 2 bodies of work, but increasing with each one until the present moment, seem to be about freedom. It's sort of the freedom to explore or to not think certain ways, because we're part of an art world, and often art is about other art, But that's not necessarily true here. You touch upon, certain like tantric paintings and models and icons from other cultures, but really these are, your own explorations.
Yeah, and I don't even know how to answer that because I think that it's sort of like the guttural expression is always the same. And then I can slide different subjects in to express the guttural expression. And as I evolve and I get older, I feel that I can be more direct, and I also don't care so much anymore. I don't really care, And I think that's the freedom, is not caring. If you care,
And you're looking over your shoulder.
yes. And Guston said something wonderful. He said, when you go into your studio and then you watch one by one all the people in your, working, all the other painters from history, leave the room one by one until you're left with yourself. And I always thought that was a really beautiful concept of how we synthesize or boil it down so that we're left with just a kind of a core. Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Given that you're such an intuitive painter, I'm wondering, do your paintings, do you think, allow you to experience more synchronicities in your life? Like, are they working through you to draw to them, through you, the information they need to be who they are?
Yeah, I'm sure. When I look at this painting, I'm just going to move this table because this painting has, various stupas at the bottom, and that was. I always, when I look at that painting, I always remember a trip that I took to Bagan with my daughter, and Bagan is an archaeological park in Myanmar. And and we saw so many amazing temples that, like when you're there, it's like so overwhelming. What are you going to do with this stuff? I find that's true with a lot of travel or art. It's like, oh my God, what are you going to do with this? It's so amazing. And, you try to chomp off a huge portion and you're chewing, but, God knows what's going to happen to it. And so I think I went there 20 years ago, and it sort of popped up in a painting. That's kind of what painting can be for me, is a kind of a slate that pulls up the memory bank.
But in a very curiously organized way.
Yeah, I'm very
based
logical.
on who you are.
Yeah. That's probably why I also paint iconic images, is because I'm an extremely logical person, and I sometimes think that is the fault of being, of mine, or being an artist. Artists are not supposed to be logical. They're supposed to have sloppy studios. They're supposed to, they're supposed to make messes and then come out with something amazing. No, that's not how I work. I like a clean studio, so if I want to sit down on the floor, I can do that. I sneak into my paintings. I don't open up all the colors and splash around. And when I do, a lot of when I went to the studio school, it's like you put something down on the charcoal, and then the other hand you erase it, and it's this constant put on, take off. I don't work like that. I add something a little bit at a time, because I have to feel it out. And if it's right, then I can do it. If I'm like putting on and taking off, then I'm just aiming to make a good painting. Mm-hmm. And that is what that is my biggest fear, is just making a good painting.
Right.
Because I don't really see the point of it. You know, I taught at CalArts, you know, and you know, it's a very common Marxist idea that we don't need more objects that are just sold to the rich, right? I was indoctrinated as a teacher.
We probably just don't need more objects, period. So objects have to hold up their end of the bargain in a big way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Maybe we can open it up to.
I was curious about what I see in your work is the diagrammatic structure that's in tension with beautiful colors, beautiful compositions, and it made me think about early days of science where there was a crossover between alchemy and science, and it was very porous, and early scientists were kind of alchemists at the same time, and then alchemy kind of got pushed to the side, and some of the context, let's say, of those early alchemical drawings and diagrams were lost. And to me, that creates a kind of mystery. And I see that mystery in your work. And I'm wondering if you're bringing back science and alchemy in your own way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very interested in it as a subject. And it's funny that you should mention that because we are working on a book of my work in alchemy. Eric gets the prize tonight. So, there's the alchemy that's the physical aspect, and then there's the alchemy that's the spiritual aspect. So I'm very interested in both, and how they relate to each other, because there is the successful alchemists were ones that were both working physically and spiritually. So the marriage of the physical and the spiritual, which is something that I think that a lot of us attempt to do, but it's very difficult, right, to marry the physical and the spiritual. But the physical is a key to the spiritual. And the spiritual is a key to the physical, right?
Well, and your paintings can be the alchemical vessel because you're potentially transporting consciousness from one state to another.
Right. Remind me to ask you to write something on my work. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, vessel. I love that. I love that a painting can be a vessel. And I started out my career as a 20-year-old really thinking a lot about vessels, right?
Mm-hmm.
So containers, and yeah, I love that. Yeah. Yes.
So when I think about your work, Emily, a lot of the themes that come up tonight are things that occur to me as well, things like perception and consciousness and time. But the word that I haven't heard yet that I always really think about is playfulness. How much play there is going on in your work. And so I wonder, how you feel about that as a concept from the perspective of the viewer, but more importantly, what role does play, work into your process? Are these excruciating to make, or do you feel very playful and childlike, in the process of discovering?
Some more playful than others, but I love that question because I think that no matter, I hope that on my deathbed, I'm still laughing and I'm still making jokes or whatever, because I think that no matter that humor is the kind of unspoken medium that brings us through life and that connects us through other people. And I think that being playful is also a synonym for being creative. And I think that creativity, being playful in your life is being creative in your life, right? And that goes, that's like, how you might have lunch by yourself to how, you approach anything in your life, right? And when I did this painting, I wanted to suggest a face, but I didn't want it to be obvious. I didn't want it to be like, look at that face looking at us. I wanted to be like, if you look at it long enough, a face appears. So, there is a moment where you're kind of like squeamish, and there's another moment where you might like laugh to yourself. So yeah, there is a lot of playfulness. Yeah.
When I was walking around, I cannot stop thinking of the Chinese mythology of creation, and which is the Pangu version. I guess you're very familiar with that. And when the world started, it was a chaos from which the things started to be generated, multiplied, and developed, and transformed, and reshaped. So when I was walking around, I see almost in all your painting there's a starting point, whether it's at the center, top, sides, or at the bottom, where things seems to be growing, generated, transformed. So I was wondering, is there that kind of connection between your thinking of doing painting as a vision of as Sarah just said, multi-dimensionality, right? I noticed that you're talking about space, universe, connection, especially from Taoism perspective. So,
like this painting behind me, the blue lines that create a structure, it's a structure of the torus, right? So that is already a structure. But when I added the colored dots, that's also a structure, but it felt very, it felt like color can be very chaotic, especially when you put a lot of colors in. It can start to buzz in a funny way. So I think there is a split second where things become a little bit unknown, and that's the chaos, right? And then I pull it together. But probably there are other artists that delve right more into the chaos and use that chaos more than I do. There's a thing that goes from the center, right? And that center was unknown. That center was that shape that's kind of like a figure was the last thing that I did in that painting. So, but it's in a way it's like I had to deal with the heart of the painting, right? And so it's amorphous, right? So yeah, it ends up being a moment, right? That painting is really more about a moment. It's when everything just kind of goes, and then it stops, right? But before that, and I think some people are a little uncomfortable with that shape because they feel that it's a little bit embryonic or it's a little ghost-like. But it's it's really meant to be amorphous, but it's like what is the shape of your soul? What is the shape of your memory? These kinds of things are amorphous.
When we are more amorphous all the time, the more we find out about what is matter, what is reality, their vibrational fields. And that's what that figure says to me, is that human consciousness embedded in the physical body is a form.
Yeah, vibration is a really interesting word because I think in the 60s we heard it a lot, like the vibration was used in kind of a hippie way, right? Yeah. And now we are thinking about vibration again because we're thinking about resonances, and it's both metaphorical and physical. you know, the experiment that was done some 20-some years ago, maybe it's 30 years ago, where, you know, you had a drum and then they had vibration and then it would create a perfect geometric shape, not geometric, but a symmetrical shape.
Yeah.
Right? So we understand that the connection there between vibration and image and whatever else is it, right?
Organizational information.
Yeah,
Yes,
whatever
it
it
is.
is. Yeah, and I think for and there is even an idea that there might be multiple worlds happening simultaneous to the room that we're sitting in, but we are all the same vibration. So we all look at each other and like, yeah, this is a room, we're sitting, the paintings, but maybe there's other entities walking right through us. Who knows?
Mhm.
Like, what a crazy idea,
Mhm.
and nothing that we ever have come remotely close to experiencing.
Except in the painting.
Except in a painting, right? That's true. It's very true. So, so that's there's so many mysteries to life, right? Yeah. And that's where I feel like I'm incredibly lucky in that I get to explore some of these mysteries, even if they're flat-footed and primitive and kind of schematic, or they take I found an image of a machine that is works in a magnetic field, and it was designed in the 60s or 50s even, and it's a very strange looking object, but I used it in one of my paintings because it needed to be remembered, and it needed to we need to rethink that, like, why is that still important? Does it make sense as a shape? So a lot of the things that I find in science that's so interesting is that because I'm still working so intuitively that these shapes that I find in science are they're also expressions. And they're expressions of nature. And they resonate with something in me. So something that I might want to express myself. But I don't really know what the connection is. Because it's so fleeting, right? But then I see that image and I say, like, oh, bingo. Why did I say bingo? What is that relationship to me? And it's from a science manual. Why should something so cold and impersonal ring such a bell? And I think it's because it is the expression of nature. Mm-hmm. And what we are looking at has been invisible for a long time. And now we see it through the microscope or through other means that we can construct a schematic drawing of it, and so it can relate to us.
Yeah.
And that's amazing, right?
Yeah, all those prosthetic devices that show us how giant our world really is, and how giant the universe is, that we can't see, sense, or otherwise determine.
Yes.
With the senses we got.
Yes.
Except maybe intuitively.
Right, and there's times when I want to say, okay, just stop. Stop with all the information. Don't tell me, don't talk to me, don't, I don't want to see anything else because I have enough. Let me just chew on what I know. That doesn't happen, Just like that saying, like, one thing you can depend on is change, right? And I'm so aware of everything changing all the time. It's crazy. It's like, oh, where was that bagel store? It's gone. And that's just the slightest, it's like, oh, the seasons, right?
Yeah.
So maybe living, even in the tropics, when when you visit a tropical country, you're in rainy season, you're in the dry season. It's like, Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's amazing. At least I'm amazed by it.
Struck by just walking around, and I thought of mandalas, looking at all of these, and the way these are, you know, the kind of resonance between sort of mythological space and the way of organizing our perception of reality and create the space of creation of what we're in, and that like this is the sort of replacement of the mandala stuff is diagrammatic systems of science, and this is our new narrative that we use to explain, which leads me to the archeology stuff. I'm also very fascinated by it, and I'm always struck by the way archaeologists as scientists pick up pieces of artwork and say, oh, this is clearly a ritual object, and the rituals are opaque to us, but my impulse is always to be like, what is the story they're telling, and what is the world view, and what are the value systems that are embedded in that? And that's something I feel like artists should be more involved in archaeology, at least as a...
Or even something like Greek mythology, right? Like, did they really cook up all these stories? Like, what do these stories really mean? I don't really think they cooked them up, but I don't have the answer. And I think that more people should be thinking about it, right? Because they do have origins, and they, you know, or the overlaps, things that are happening simultaneously around the whole planet, maybe 1,000 years ago. Like, why did that happen? What caused it to happen simultaneously? So there is an answer, but we don't exactly know. A lot of us have postulations, and I'm not going to go there, but it is worthy of our thinking about it, because it has everything to do with how we live our lives, and how we live our lives, and how we think about what world we leave behind. See, and I think that's the crucial issue we're talking about now. What are we leaving behind? And you know, when you have children or your grandchildren, you're thinking like, you know, we need to step up our game a little bit. You know?
Well, if these survive, I certainly hope they do. Can you imagine 2,000, 4,000 years from now, how people and other people will regard these? That would be fascinating.
I'm going to put another coat of varnish on everything. But I did a mosaic in Hong Kong, and one of the greatest things about doing that mosaic is that I got to watch people touching my art, you know, my paintings, and you know, and I'm teaching my granddaughter, like, no, you can't touch that. But here, people were touching, and I was like, I felt so good that people were touching my work.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I would love to do more mosaics because I like that tactile experience. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And most likely it will really stick around
Yeah.
for a long time.
Let me ask Sarah a question. You work in a really maximal way, and I work in a less maximal way.
But there's so many crossovers.
Yes, yes. And I was kind of, I had a lot of curiosity about your working method and where complexity and maximal, like what is it that you're striving for to make your paintings maximal?
Well, there's two answers to that. So I grew up with hoarders, and I was immersed in these dense environments that just got more so over the years I was living at home. It was like a form of archaeology, because I would only be there in the summer. I'd be able to see the stratifications that would build up the other 9 months of the year. For me, that was great, because my mother threw away everything. She liked to live in the future, not in the past, not so my stepmother. And that sort of set the tone. I didn't realize until my, I don't know, mid-20s that in my own work, I was holding on to everything. It's like, oh, you know, people tell you not to do that in art school. It's like you got to kill the thing you love in order to make your painting sing. And I'm like, oh, I'm saving everything. And then I thought, you know, but why throw anything away? You know, really, why? Because that's not how the universe works. Everything is recycled or it sticks around in one form or another. And as I sort of embraced that, I didn't even embrace it. I found that I couldn't get rid of anything. So I had to create strategies for saving everything and keep on building, very much the way that, you know, like New York City does. It has historical preservation, but it has rezoning, so now I can build up this tall, and it's sort of like that. We humans do that. But matter does that too. And I think that if you've ever tried to organize the information on your laptop, you will know that you are also a hoarder because you have all these photos and documents, and I mean, my desktop is filled with stuff, or I stuff it in a folder that's in a folder that's in another folder. So, and then we're importing so much information. So for me, my complex paintings that are meant to seem simple, but offer a platform for being able to see things in a complex way, sort it out. You know, it's like, how do you filter a complex reality and have it be sort of sorted out? So if you could say my paintings function, they function as filter builders for people.
Wow, that's a great answer. I didn't know that. That's fascinating because it's almost like you're creating compartments, but an organized compartment, and then you're allowing things to coexist. That's the approach and the methodology is totally different. Yeah, that's fascinating.
And yet we still both have a kind of iconic central aspect, you know, so we're seeing this sort of space that's more or less bilaterally symmetrical, more or less, yet with complexity and a lot of different kinds of scapes, whether that's an infoscape or landscape or a hypothetical space. There are all these different realms knit into it.
Well, at the end of the day, underneath our flesh, we're both skeletal.
Yeah.
You know, and we have sort of like if you laid your skeleton down next to my skeleton and we both rotted away, people wouldn't know which ones are because we're kind of the same height. Yeah.